And that all came from that book. So one thing I'll stress to any authors, one of the best things you can do is reach out to someone that's already been there and try to co-author a book with them, because that just put everything on the fast track instantly.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back. It is Wednesday again, your favorite time of the week, my favorite time of the week, and it's time for Leaders Talk. As usual, I am your intrepid host, Andrew Dupy, Chief Relationship Officer here at Leaders Press. And today, my guest is Dan Portik. So, Dan is the owner of BVS Film Productions. That's headquartered out of Cleveland. And he has been adding new businesses and clients for years using his unique online selling system. His cyber prowess has even caught the attention of world-renowned sales guru Tom Hopkins. And together, Tom and Dan co-authored the bestseller Fill Your Funnel. That's a guide to selling with social media. I know that's something that is of interest to all of you. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about his relationship with Tom and talk about how to monetize those kind of funnels. Tom, or sorry, Dan. Welcome to the show. Great to have you. So, yeah, fill us in a
Great,
little bit
thanks.
about what BBS is and what you've done with it and in your relationship.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I greatly appreciate it, Andrew. Yeah, so if BBS Film Productions has been around about 10 years. Prior to that, I had an ad agency for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And we kind of went and reinvented ourselves 10 years ago and became more of a video production group. We're full service. We work with small to medium and oddly enough, some really large customers that send us pieces, parts for video marketing programs and things of this nature. And then recently we've branched off in another group called Premier Podcast Productions, and we
Yeah.
also do podcast editing and production in that area as well.
Yeah. So, what was your journey to actually getting into this? Because I mean, you start small, you get into film production, podcasting. What made you make that kind of decision to move into that area of business?
Well, 2009, I guess would be the
Yeah. Oh my
pretty
gosh.
simple.
Yeah. It's either 2009 or 2020, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so the economy obviously took a dive in 2009. For those of you who don't know it, it's very similar to the economy that we're going through now,
Yeah.
or the Fannie Mae thing, all that with the banks and everything. So we kind of had to we had to reinvent ourselves. So we had some very large groups as an ad agency, and we put a lot of ducks in a row and a lot of eggs in one basket, and they all just kind of pulled their reins back, and we had to kind of think, okay, now what are we going to do? How are we going to work as a business in this industry? And we saw that there was a nice niche with video production where there at the time there weren't a lot. There were either very large video productions with big clunky stuff,
Yeah.
and they'd have to go in and bring in $500,000 worth of gear to do a day's commercial. Um, Things were switching right then. They were just coming out with DSLR cameras, and my one designer came in and he's, you got to check this out. He shows his camera, goes, this thing records video. And it
Yeah.
was like,
Canon Rebel here.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
basically something like that. And I'm like, you're kidding. And he goes, yeah. I said, you don't need that big, you know, thing on your shoulder. No, 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 because check it out. And I'll be darned, it wasn't 4K, it was like 1080, but it was really crystal clear. And I'm like, there's our niche. And that's what we're going to go after. So we went in to large companies and medium-sized companies that were using these gigantic groups and said, hey guys, we can do this for less and we can give you the same quality, and we're going to do it, and we're going to turn on a dime. Well, that actually worked out really well for us because a lot of companies were like, great. What do we got to lose? Let's try it. So, again, we got in with some really big companies that just started feeding us small work. And then next thing you know, they sent us a bunch more work and like, okay, we got to grow now. So that was the main focus of how we got to where we were with that business.
Well, then you kind of got it on the ground floor. And I mean, if people nowadays can't think back as far as 2009,
Right.
because
That's
the
long
world
time.
has changed so much since then. This is when
Yeah.
YouTube still had a time limit on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this is when this kind of stuff was really just breaking in.
Right. Right.
So, but still, you had to have some challenges in increasing visibility and actually being able to get to the right doors. So what
Right.
ways did you solve that issue and that problem?
Well, in at that time, it was a phone and a desk, and
Yeah.
social media was just coming out. So I did a lot of calls. I did a lot of things of that nature, and that kind of evolved into my relationship with Tom Hopkins and how that worked. He was my mentor. I went to a lot of his training, and I learned how to close and prospect. And prospecting is all about numbers. I mean, it just is. You do the numbers, you're gonna get business. It's just the way it works, and you have to do it consistently. The amount of numbers you do and the consistency you have will determine the amount of sales you get a month from now. If
Mhm.
you slack off, you're going to have that waiting period in there. So as social media was evolving, I was finding I could do the same closes, the same prospecting with Tom Hopkins, his techniques online.
Right.
And so I just started going into social media and started, sending out, through social media, specific messages that were specific yet general. So they would be enough for like a group of people. And I would do 100, 200 a day. And all of a sudden I'd start getting these leads back. And then they didn't want to talk on the phone. They want to just keep going online. So I would email back and forth. Next thing you know, we landed a $15,000 deal. I never even talked to the person. I didn't, and I got the PO. Then I went in with our team and talked to them. And it was a very large company. It was I'll tell you who it was. It was Rigid Tool at the time, and they're in our town here. This was a little while back, but we landed a very large account because of it. And I'm like, okay, I got to do something with this. And so I reached out online to Tom Hopkins, and I said, hey, I'm using your techniques through social media, and I think we need to write a book together. I would love to write a book with you on this because it's your techniques. I'm using it. I'm successful at it doing this because of you. And he got back to me fairly quick. I'm kind of going ahead, but I'll figure out this kind of
Yeah.
went right
Oh,
into
go.
it.
Yeah, go for it.
So, so he got back to me online and said, and I was very nervous because, he's like,
Yeah.
up, he's on the top of the mountain, and I'm down here, and I was very nervous hitting that send button. It was like, but I did it, and he ended up emailing me right back. He said, well, you know what? I'll send it to my team. You'll probably get an email or call back from our VP of marketing, and they'll talk to you about this, and we'll let you know if we're interested or not. So I didn't think anything of it. And like 2, 3 weeks later, I get an email back from their VP, and she said, "Yeah, we're interested. We like the concept, and we just want to let you know only a handful of people, have ever written a book with Tom, but we're real interested because our publisher said as soon as it's created, we'll publish it, and we're fine with that." So I'm like, okay, I'm an author." so so now it's like, now what do I do? So they were so nice because they've written, I think he wrote 30 books already, and one of them
Yeah.
was, huge. So they had a whole system in place, and it was really nice. They walked me through the whole thing. The first thing was a brain dump. Just give us everything you have in your head, write it down, send it to us. So I typed it up, sent it to him, and that started the process, which took about 8 or 9 months to create the book.
Yeah.
Um, so it was very cool. And then, okay, I'm an author now. I'm writing books all over the place just because of it, which is cool. It opened up a lot of doors for myself and my company.
Well, yeah, and that's relevant to a lot of the interest of our audience. Many of them are prospective authors thinking about making that first
Yeah.
writing a book. So, yeah, did that help with your? I mean, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I know the answer to this, but did it actually help with your social media outreach to actually have that book to refer to and go back to
Oh,
is your central point?
oh yeah, it helped a lot. To this day, it still helps, and not as much as like the money you make from the book, because it ended up becoming a bestseller, which was
Right.
really nice. And it did within like 2 weeks, I think, from launching. And a lot of that is because we did some really specific promos through certain areas that they cost a little bit of money, but when they were done, they like boom, it sold like 2,000 books in like one day on
Right.
Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah. We're
So that
familiar.
yeah, that was really cool. So
Yeah.
we're like, awesome, so away we go. But yeah, it did open up a lot of doors for us, in many, many different ways. More so with customers,
Hmm.
because there's a lot of customers. It just brought a different level of integrity, I think, all around by being able to say, I wrote a book with Tom.
Well,
So that was
and
cool.
there's something that's really to be said for warming up a lead before you ever get in front of them.
Oh yeah.
Because the big to me, the biggest problem that you ever have when you're starting a sales process with somebody, no matter whether it's from selling a computer to all the way up to selling a $120,000 book contract, which I've done all of that, is
Mhm.
establishing that trust at the beginning of that sales relationship. So
Exactly.
how does what you've done improve that part of the process?
Well, I'll give you an example. There was a customer
Sure.
that's still a customer today that actually grew to one of our largest customers. I get an email out of the blue from this guy in another state. He's like, "Hey, I saw your book. We have a new marketing manager over here. I'd like to introduce you." And he was the vice president of that company. So she's in another state. She just started, but I think you're the person that we're going to want to use for starting our campaign, and you seem to have a handle on all this. So they introduced me to the person. Next thing you know, started with a couple of videos, and all of a sudden we're doing almost all their videos. And they're a $5 billion company. So it was, and that all came from that book. So one thing I'll stress to any authors, one of the best things you can do is reach out to someone that's already been there and try to co-author a book with them, because that just put everything on the fast track instantly. Um, that's my thought. And then it opens up a lot of doors for you in other areas.
Oh yeah, and we agree. I mean, that's actually one of the things that we help do is connect authors with other authors,
Yep.
whether it be in an anthology or like-minded people, getting them
Right.
together in the same room and starting to actually work towards producing something. And
Hmm.
just like you, we have spent much of our time concentrating on social media to actually
Yeah.
do our initial sales funnel through things like LinkedIn and our podcast, our
Right.
Instagram now. I think right now social media is by far the best way to get leads rather than the old fashioned knock on the door or give them a phone call cold.
Right.
Uh, so
Yeah.
yeah, how have you continued to have social media grow as your way to actually fill that funnel?
Yeah, so in our situation, we use a couple of different things. We use some automation to send out social media through things like Hootsuite, things of that nature. But the crux of our leads come from LinkedIn, and it
Mhm.
comes from cold outreaches to groups. So groups of people. Like within LinkedIn, groups have been very successful for us. We pick a specific group of, let's say, podcasters or whatever they might be, and we'll send a little note saying, because a lot of people don't know, you can go into, once you're a member of a group, you can reach out to anybody in that group at
Mhm.
least one time and say, hey, this is who I am, and no matter what their connection level is. So that's kind of nice. And we would say something like, just, hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a new member of the group, Dan, and I put my little stuff on the bottom. 90% of the people will click on that stuff on the bottom to find out who you are. And it's
Right,
just a
right.
very subtle way. Out of 100, you might get three or four that are going to say, yeah, we're kind of interested, you know, and then you kind of follow up with, oh, great, tell us a little bit more about what you're doing. And this all happens online. There's no talking for the most part. But I also leave a little thing in there for, through a Calendly link. Calendly, I think is how they pronounce it.
Yeah.
Where yeah. So, if you're interested in contacting us, just click here and we'll set up a meeting. And that happens sometimes, but you usually have to be a little aggressive, and not aggressive, but forward, and say, how about if we set up a time maybe next week, to just chat a little bit, real casual. And that opens up the doors. Um, and from there, knowing how to close is another factor. I mean, you
Mhm.
really do need to have some basic closing techniques available. And if you do that properly, it eventually will become order taking once the customer gets to know you. Tom and I call that the promised land.
Yeah.
Once you get into the promised land, you become an order taker, and it's the account is yours to lose at that point
Yeah, I
or
mean,
keep.
absolutely. And that's And that's the whole concept of making everything warm, because you can't just jump from hi, how you doing on the phone to closing, which I think a lot of companies, a lot of
Oh, yeah.
businesses that try to do that. I mean, that they're drilling into the young sales force of America that the close has got to almost be part of the pitch. And I don't think that even remotely works.
No. And that's really the bad rap that salespeople get, because there's so many that are untrained and don't know the
Yeah.
procedure and the process for the sequence actually for closing a sale.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
So you then moved a little bit into the podcasting realm. So I want to talk about
Yes.
that a little bit. What was your inspiration into going in that direction?
I had a business coach I brought on board for about a year, and he's actually he's younger than me and two steps ahead of where we are in our company. So he's had a couple
Yeah,
of successful exits already in our industry. So it was a nice niche to, nice thing to bring him on board and work with us. So he was saying, in the video business, it's kind of like ups and downs. You'll get a huge project in, you'll wait for the money, and you come back, you pay off your bills, and you take the rest, and hopefully it's enough to survive on. But in podcasting, it's continual. So that's the key, is to create a stable growth of income, and it also brings extra value to your business as you think if you want to sell it, for example. I think it's 54 times, you know, versus just having a business that's bills out regularly.
yeah,
It's worth 54 times as much, having a subscription-based business. Hence, you
yeah.
see all those out there.
And how have you been able to use that to build relationships?
What the podcasting
Yeah,
world is.
yeah,
Well, actually, it's kind of unique for us because we bring prospects on our own podcast, and that is a big plus because what I would say almost every person that we brought on to our podcast that had an interest decided to go with us. And it's just because they come into our studio, they see what we have here, or they'll do it remotely and we lay something out and they see what their podcast could look like with us editing for them.
yeah, yeah.
So it's been a great tool for us, not only to get our name out there, but also to close sales, really.
In what ways did you, I mean, obviously you're already in the video production industry, so you probably have a leg up on a lot of other people, but many of our authors or prospective authors, they're thinking about moving in that direction once they have their book
Yeah.
out, because this is the first step
Yep.
to actually beginning that. So what advice would you have to someone that is beginning a podcast? There's a million of them out there, and there's a million more in production right now, to be
Right.
able to stand out and be able to get noticed in all the white noise.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say niche as much as you can. Niche, I guess, is the more common term for it. But get very vertical in your marketing. So think in terms of like what your book is about very specifically, and try to get to that audience and bring that message out to them. From a standpoint of ways to promote it, in addition to having the podcast, you want to use your social media and on a regular basis create promos like YouTube Shorts that could go out, prior to the podcast, and also give it to your guest. The other thing is bring guests on your podcast that already have an established following, because the bigger that following, the more your promos are going to go in front of them, and it's going to help build your podcast as well. And then the last step is you want to be a guest on other people's podcasts. And I know, I don't know if your group offers that, but there's like podcast tours you can do.
Yeah.
And someone like your group could promote that, and say you're going to go on these 7 or 8, and then the author goes on those, that kind of thing. So that's probably the main ones that are most effective.
And I laugh because that was our process and how we got Leaders Talk to the position that it's in. And I'm
Yeah,
glad that I was able to do that kind of organically. It's like,
yeah,
it just sounded right to me.
right, right,
I
yeah,
didn't have a Dan Portik in the room telling me how to pull that off. So I'm glad
yeah,
that I did some of the right things. But yeah, I mean,
perfect.
and for us, it's done such a good, it's been such a valuable method to both create a knowledge base for our authors, create something that we can promote for our internal authors. They can reach out and make connections with people like you that can just come and share information. And that builds relationships out. That's one of the ways in which we've been able to reach so many areas. So yeah, the value of it, I think, is extremely, extremely high. And yeah, you're right. The way that you can actually get that the visibility up is just by following some pretty simple steps.
Yeah, and there's social media is good, and it's got its downfalls as well.
It
It's
does,
pitfalls.
yeah.
The good part is you can do it all yourself,
Right.
and it takes a lot of elbow grease, though. And the other side of that coin is it's pretty saturated. So the vertical you go, the better. And to take that a step further, since I've written a book with Tom, I also have done his life story documentary through our company, and we put that out. And we were sending a tweet out, to somebody, and we didn't think anything of this, but the idea of getting another author that's really higher up in your social media or interested in your social media is very important, or someone to partner with, because we sent a tweet out, we didn't think anything of it, and next thing you know, it had, I think it was 14,000 views. And we don't get 14,000 views on anything, and it's so all of a sudden we sold, like, I don't know, maybe 40 documentaries in 5 minutes. And I found out that Tom Hopkins just tapped his like button on it because we tagged him in it, and he's got 350,000 people in his first line of LinkedIn,
Right.
like, so that, or Twitter, one of those, and it just opened up an incredible thing for us. So I know that can happen. I've seen it firsthand, but the whole thing is be bold. You have to be bold and take a chance, and make sure you have something you could offer that person, because every one of these people at that level have a handler of some
Right.
sort, and you have to get past that handler. And I found LinkedIn is actually very good, because a lot of times the actual people are on LinkedIn because they know it's not like Twitter and all these other ones. So I've been able to reach a lot of people directly through LinkedIn,
Yeah.
through like in mails, things like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's that whole part, the whole idea, just be boldness. I mean, I'd never talked to a CEO outside of people I'd worked for in my entire life until I went to work for Leaders Press, and then all of
Yeah.
a sudden I have like 5 or 6 sales calls with 9-figure people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was the first time for me, but it was all about us being bold enough just to say, "Hey, well, let's go knock on those doors and see what happens." And I think that's one of the problems that people do have in breaking into that, is that they have the I don't know, it's not really imposter syndrome as much. I mean, I think that may factor into it a little bit. Just
Yeah.
that, why would this person want to talk to somebody like me?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you get past that, you'd be surprised how these people are, and how accessible they are. I talked to Earl Nightingale's wife.
Mhm.
She's still alive. In the documentary, I was able to reach, because I had something interesting to give them. I wanted them to be in the documentary for Tom Hopkins. I never realized how many people made their fortunes by his training.
Mhm.
People that you wouldn't believe. Sam Adams, he didn't get in the documentary, but he talks about, the art of selling, the master of the art of selling book got his Samuel Adams company off the ground.
Mhm.
Just, so, and there's people like that all over the place that just use his training over the years.
Yeah. It's amazing. And yeah, we've had some of the same experiences. I mean, heck, a lot of the books that we have written with us, like Next Level Selling with Tom Phaedra.
Yeah.
I'll shout out Tom there. We picked his brain for years, and after he wrote our book with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just it. That's another reason why you want to have these kind of relationships, is to be able to pick brains, be able to get those the golden nuggets, the pieces of information that just drive you, and be able to
Right.
use those for your own benefits and uses,
Yeah.
and theirs, and your partners.
Oh, yeah. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Uh, so speaking of golden nuggets, Dan, as we're kind of starting to wind down a little bit here,
Sorry.
hold on one second, Gerald. We're gonna take a pause. That's coming through on the audio. There's a trash truck. It's gonna be the editing part. This is the Murphy's Law. Okay, he's going. So,
Yeah.
Dan, speaking of golden nuggets, great segue there. As we kind of wind down the show, well, I like to have a little segment where we have just a golden nugget, something we haven't covered, something that you feel is absolutely useful to our audience that they can just grab and go with. So, what would be your golden nugget that you would have to offer to them?
My golden nugget is be bold and don't
Yeah,
be, if well, and this is the same one Tom Hopkins and also Zig Ziglar uses. They say do what you fear most. And he told me that many times. He says, Zig and I used to be on the road for 30 years, and he says, all we've done is just done what we feared most and just
yeah,
kept doing it. And it paid off. So
yeah. I love that, and to our audience, I would say, if that fear is writing your book, Dan is a perfect example of why that should not hold you back, along with all of our other authors that we featured on here. So
yeah,
yeah, I love that we've been able to actually share with them a story, outside of our own authors of how that kind of success can work.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's great. I appreciate you having me on here and being able to tell a little bit about my story and how I can help people.
Well, a little bit more about you then. What are some ways in which our audience can find you?
Well, the easiest way is danportik.com, DANPORTIK.com. And that really has everything about me and what I'm involved with and things I can help with.
Excellent. Well, we're going to pop those links down there down below.
Mhm.
And anybody that wants to go through that, go ahead and give it a click. Dan, I really appreciated having you on. I think that was some great information. Yeah, I love the synergy. I love how your journey and ours just was so similar. So it's
Awesome.
kind of a great double story there.
Yeah, and I also would like to give
Yeah.
we have a book. I have a book out called The Secret Online Door. And anybody that sends me an email at info@danportik.com, I'll send them a free copy of that. It's all about negotiating and how you can save money in the economy we are currently dealing with right now.
Well, that is something I think everybody needs. And that link will be down below as well, ladies and gentlemen. Dan, thank you so much for being here. And we wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors, sir.
Thanks for having me.